All right. Well, first I want to welcome y'all here. I know you're taking time out of your day, and I will certainly make sure this is an investment in your time. This is something that the talks that we offer on a regular basis. This is actually a series of talks that we'll be doing. So today we're doing the talk on GMO foods. Next time we get together, we're going to build on this. We're going to talk about putting together a healthy diet, what that looks like, talking about some of the misconceptions of red meat and cholesterol or eggs. People get confused about eating too many eggs because of cholesterol and because of fat. Gluten, which is a big thing now. Talking about cooking oils, what oils should be heated up, what oils shouldn't be heated up. Looking at labels, how to read a label, how to differentiate these scientific terms on the labels that I have no idea what I'm reading. So we're really going to help put together a healthy diet and work on building every month. So this is the first in the series of talks. And for those of you who are guests, by the way, my name is Dr. Albanese. I want to welcome you as well. Our mission is to help as many families as possible create healthy lifestyles and reach optimal health through chiropractic. That's what our mission is, and this is part of that mission in creating a healthy lifestyle. Nutrition is part of that. It's one of the essentials of health. And this is kind of a maze that we go through with nutrition, which it shouldn't be that way. You know, we should go to the store, buy food. We know what it is. We know it's nourishing. It's going to help our kids grow and develop, and it's going to help us live a long, healthy life. But yet, it doesn't always work that way. And a few months ago, I started putting out some handouts in the rooms on GMO foods. And I did that as kind of an experiment. I wanted to get a feel for what people's reaction and response was. And I would ask some questions about GMO foods. Hey, do you know much about GMO foods? Some people said, oh, I stay away from them. I know they're not healthy. Other people said, well, I don't really know much about them. You know, and other people, I've never heard of that. What does it mean? So that's what gave me kind of the criteria to say, okay, we're going to make this the first program. Because we can help you put together a healthy diet, but if it's consisting of foods that aren't going to help facilitate the process of a healthy diet, then we need to start from square one. So today's talk is going to be about genetically modified organisms, GMO food. Now, I will use the word GMO and genetically engineered interchangeably, so you're aware of that. I'll also use the word plant and crops interchangeably, okay? And by the way, I see a lot of people writing, which is awesome. Take notes. We're also going to have this on our website next week, so if you do miss anything, you can go there, hit play, rewind a bunch of times. So I'll use those words interchangeably. So we're going to go through several different topics within GMO foods. First, I'm going to explain what are GMO foods. How do they make them? Why did they make them? How did they get away with making them? How do they get away with not telling us they're making them? And then lastly, and probably most importantly, we're going to give you some resources and tools that will help you differentiate between the food you're eating, food you're not eating, food, you know, am I eating GMO foods, am I not? How do I know, and how do I go about putting together a diet that consists of really good, organic, healthy foods? Doesn't have to cost more, and we're going to talk to you about that next time in a lot of detail. So, genetically modified organisms. First, we'll start off with, why do you want to modify an organism? Any organism, okay, food or what have you. We want to work, what takes place is someone makes a decision to say, hey, you know what, we need to change or add the trait of one thing and put it in another. That's why genetic modification takes place. So in this case, there are two reasons to genetically modify food. To make food be able to produce its own pesticide from within itself. So when the bugs eat the plants or what have you, the bug or insect or rodent dies. Doesn't eat the whole crop, okay? Second reason is to become herbicide resistant. They call them Roundup ready crops, Roundup resistant crops. So when we spray the fields with Roundup, the crops, the plants don't die. Inherently, there's something wrong with that because then we eat that. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. So in this case, the companies that produce the foods want to genetically engineer the crops to take on the trait of Roundup, specifically the active ingredient in Roundup called glyphosate. Okay? Glyphosate, for those that are right. Glyphosate. Okay? That's the active ingredient, one of the active ingredients in Roundup. So how do you do that? Scientists at Monsanto, which is the company that's a huge GMO producer and the company that makes Roundup, found this bacteria that was growing outside of the Roundup factory and found that it was resistant to Roundup. They said, that's what we want the crops to be like. So they took that bacteria and they figured out what gene was creating that response. And it was the glyphosate within the gene. So then they take that gene, isolate it, make millions of copies, and put it into something called a gene gun. Looks like a gun. It has a .22 caliber charge. You fire it into the gene of the seed of the crop that you want to modify. Now that crop has that trait. Now, there is another way of doing it where you heat up the seedling, but basically the same process. You inject into the seed that trait. In this case, it's glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. Now, there's another chemical that's used as well, and it's actually a bacteria, Bacillus Thuringiensis. Just write down BT, make it easier for yourselves. BT, they put this bacteria in corn and in cotton. Now, this is a soil bacteria. It's a bacteria found in soil. However, when you change that bacteria in its form and create a spray, it becomes very toxic and becomes a pesticide. It kills bugs, rodents, and things like that. So if we can put that in the corn and the cotton, has the same effect. Now, I don't know if that concerns anyone. To me, it did. So inherently, there's something wrong with that. Okay? Because what happens is you're changing the genetic makeup of these crops, these plants. Now, you're not just changing one part of it. This is the gene. When you study epigenetics, a gene has the ability to be expressed throughout the entire organism. So that those chemicals that they put in the seed are now part of the entire plant. Now, it doesn't stay isolated to the plant. It also goes back into the soil. About 20% of the nutrients that are found in that plant, even the weed, it's a plant, go back into the soil. So now, one of the problems is when you genetically change something, okay, I'm going to use the word God, I hope I don't offend anyone, but I think God did a pretty good job when he created stuff. You know, he didn't get to the end of his life and say, oh, well, he probably didn't say that. Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. I forgot something. I need to modify what I did the first time. You know, he got all the way down to Z. He got done with the zebras and, oh, darn it. Well, he wouldn't say that either. But we're changing nature. This genetic makeup of this food does not exist in nature. We are genetically designed to live in our environment. We're designed to eat apples and break them down. Designed to eat meat and break it down. We know what to do with that. But when you genetically change what we are intended to eat, you change how our body is affected by that. You also change the entire genetic strain of that seed. Now, the problem with that is when you genetically put all those cells into that DNA, you don't know what type of changes are going to occur. There are literally thousands of mutations that take place within that gene. In fact, the head of technology prospecting at Monsanto, a scientist, Ginny Urson, says about genetically modifying food. It's pretty reassuring. Quote, "It's a game of chance, much like breeding. You never know how the offspring will turn out." Eat it and we'll see. Is basically what is happening. So, and I'm going to give you a whole list, okay? But to date, 93% of the soybeans grown in the U.S. are genetically modified. 88% of the corn, 93% of the cottonseed, which is used for oil, 90% of the canola, 95% of the sugar beets, which is used for sugar, Hawaiian and Chinese papaya, zucchini, yellow crookneck squash, and alfalfa. Of moderate risk, in other words, they're testing foods all the time to keep on top of it because this is pretty well top secret, right? We don't want you to know about it. So now they're testing foods, and I'm just going to name a couple of common things that now they found glyphosate in these foods, either through cross-contamination or because they're starting to genetically modify them. Chard, table beets, flax, rice, and wheat. Read a label that doesn't have wheat in it, okay? So what's funny is, not funny, but ironic, Jenny Urson says, I know people, quote, I know people have their issues with this technology, but it's a tremendous technology. It's using nature as a guide. Let you be the judge of that, okay? These are the people that are making your food, genetically. To me, my food should be grown in a field where some guy in a pair of cowboy hat and boots, pair of jeans and a flannel shirt is plucking stuff out of the ground, putting it in his old pickup, driving it to the store, and then we eat it, right? It shouldn't be in a lab with somebody in a white coat with probably some kind of a gas mask because it's toxic, is making our food. But that's what's happening. So the third thing that they do is something called crop desiccation. And Syngenta, which is another huge company like a Monsanto, advertises crop desiccation as the standard measure to assure high quality production. Crop desiccation. At the very end of the life of this plant or crop, right before we harvest it, we're going to bathe it, as they say, in Roundup. They're going to bathe it in Roundup. They give it a Roundup bath. That's what they call it. Why? Well, they want to kill off all the weeds, so it makes the harvest easier. And because the vegetables and the crops, rather, will grow at a pretty consistent level, but then all of a sudden, some are going to mature faster than others. So we want to kill them too. So everything looks the same when we put it on the shelf. This is what they do. And that's the reasoning. Potato skins become real hard, so it increases shelf life. Grains, they spray the grains within a few days of harvesting them. Now here's the thing. You can go to Whole Foods and Trader Joe and get the best organic cleaner. You can get whatever you want. It cannot come off.
Right, because it's in it.
It's in it. And now it's on it, but you can't get it off. When they spray it, it stays on there. So the result of that is we're using 323 million pounds more of glyphosate, Roundup, each year because the weeds are becoming resistant to the Roundup. You know how antibiotics, you know, the superbugs and all, we've abused antibiotics over the years. So now we have these superbugs. The same thing is happening with the weeds. Now, we have 40 new plant diseases that never existed before. We have diseases of the crops that were able to be maintained and corrected. Now you can't do that anymore. There are 13 different glyphosate-resistant species that never existed before in 73 different locations throughout the United States. We have superbugs in the weeds now. So these are pretty scary things. U.S. Geological Survey says that 60 to 100% of the air, rain, and water has Roundup in it, right? And it's a wonder why the U.S. exportation of corn to the United Kingdom has dropped 99%. It's called the pond effect. When you cross a big body of water, the food changes and loses all the glyphosate. So they don't want it over there. It's a joke. So why does all this take place?
Money.
Money. Yeah, money.
Corporate greed.
Monsanto's a $15 billion a year company.
Is that who makes Roundup?
That's who makes Roundup.
Family Business.
Now, why did this happen? How did this all take place in the beginning? I'm going to take you through a real quick history. I feel it's real important if you understand this stuff. Now, you know, I know this is kind of a heady talk a little bit, but I think it's important if you know, no pun intended, the roots, right? And really have an understanding of what takes place. So in 1964, glyphosate was patented as a chelator.
Mhm.
In 1974, glyphosate started to become used as a weed killer. Now, why is it being used as a weed killer? Because of its chelating properties. Chelation basically is this. I'm going to grab hold of something and I'm not going to let it go. So picture a weed like a building. You get in the elevator in the basement and you go to the first, second, third floor and you get off at those floors. Well, that's what nutrients are doing. Nutrients leave the soil, they take the elevator up, and they make sure there's nourishment for that weed to grow. It's a plant, right? Works great. But now we introduce Roundup. The glyphosate acts as a chelator, and it stands at the elevator door. And it says, okay, nutrients are going to come off. We're going to grab them as soon as that door opens, and we're not going to let you in. So you spray Roundup on a weed, go back the next day. What color is it? It's brown, right? The process works very efficiently, very effectively. Now, glyphosate in particular chelates, grabs hold of and doesn't let go calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, zinc, manganese, copper, and 25 other different enzymes. But those are the primary ones. It can chelate 80% of the calcium, iron, and zinc out of a weed. Now let me ask you this. What do plants need to survive? What do we need to survive? The same thing that happens to the weed happens to the food. We think, oh wow, look, they fortified it with all these great vitamins and minerals. That's great, right? We're going to get all those vitamins and minerals. They should be in it in the first place. We shouldn't have to fortify food. You don't buy an apple or a carrot and say, holy cow, we need to add some beta carotene to this carrot. No, you get the carrot, right? That's what you're eating, the carrot. You shouldn't have to fortify it. But that's why our food is fortified, because it takes it out, so we have to put it back in.
More money.
Yeah, more money, right? The food could be a lot less expensive. But that's why glyphosate is used in the food, because if it can cause that to happen to the insects and the bugs and the rodents, they eat an ear of corn, no big deal. The whole crop is saved because that rodent died. But the same thing happens to the food we eat. Now, think about this. Who grazes on the fields?
Yeah.
What do they feed the livestock? Alfalfa,
Alfalfa.
especially, right? Corn, GMO corn, GMO alfalfa. So now our food source is being depleted of nutrients. So our food and we are being depleted of nutrients. So you can't affect one part of the ecosystem and not affect the others. You know how they say, oh, our soil's becoming deficient in minerals and vitamins? This is how it happens. Not because you're planting too much stuff. You're supposed to rotate your crops. Right, plant them over here. The next year, plant them over here. The soil will regenerate itself. That doesn't happen when you plant GMO foods and you're spraying all this stuff. It doesn't regenerate. So now our soil is being depleted of all these nutrients. The master plan of Monsanto is replacing all the natural seed with GMO seed. That's their master plan. In 1992, the FDA, which is the agency that's in charge of watching over us and protecting us, the Food and Drug, right? They said, we don't need to do any studies on this stuff. No studies necessary. Because we don't find any difference between the way the body processes the GMO food compared to the non-GMO food. So we don't need to do any studies. But then there was a lawsuit in 1998 against the FDA. This is part of what was written. Despite these differences, safety assessments of GM foods has been based on the idea of substantial equivalence, such that if a new food is found to be substantially equivalent in consumption and nutritional characteristics, not value, characteristics, to an existing food, it can be regarded as safe as the conventional food. However, several animal studies indicate serious health risks associated with GM food consumption, including, now think about over the last 10, 15, 20 years, this was introduced in 1992, when I read this list of the increase in occurrence of problems like this. Infertility, immune dysregulation, accelerated aging, dysregulation of genes associated with cholesterol synthesis, insulin regulation, cell signaling, protein formation, changes in the liver, kidney, spleen, and gastrointestinal system. How many infertility clinics were around 30 years ago? How many are there now? In 1998, that lawsuit brought forth 44,000 internal documents by FDA scientists, and what they said, quote, was overwhelming concerns with relating to GMO foods. They could not be regarded as and presumed safe. They viewed them and referenced them as dangerous, leading to new diseases and different sorts of allergies. When I was growing up, probably half the kids at my lunch table had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Right, everybody.
Why
I didn't
is
know
it?
anybody who had peanut allergy ever.
I don't think it existed, right? But why is it now, when my son brings a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to lunch, he has to go to a separate table? We should not have allergies to food. Food is meant to nourish us. We shouldn't be alert. You shouldn't develop an inflammatory response to food. That just is not right. My kids have sleepovers. You know, parents bring here's a sleeping bag, here's a pillow, maybe a little whoopee, depending on how old they are, right? The pajamas and the EpiPen. I mean, that right? My kids know how to use an EpiPen. Why is that? This is food. We should not be allergic to food. That's just wrong. Today, there are no regulations on GMO foods. None. The only caveat by the FDA to all the manufacturers of the GMO foods is, if you would like, you can voluntarily submit any of your studies to show us that this is safe or not.
Like that's gonna happen.
Right? Now, why does that happen? How can that even happen if the FDA is supposed to watch out for us?
Money's changing hands somewhere.
Linda Fisher, who in 2001 was the EPA Deputy Administrator. She is also the Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for Monsanto. Margaret Miller. We're going to talk about bovine hormones next talk when we talk about dairy. Margaret Miller was the FDA branch chief that evaluated bovine growth hormones in 1989. She is the Monsanto scientist on bovine growth hormones. Right? Ann Vennerman, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under Bush in 2001. She's on the board of directors of one of the Monsanto subsidiaries. Roger Beachy is the director of the USDA in 2009. He is also the director of the Danforth Center, one of the Monsanto subsidiaries. Michael Taylor, I didn't name this, but they call him the food czar. He was the FDA Deputy Commissioner in 1991 and 2001. He's a former Monsanto attorney and vice president. Thomas Vilsack, who's the current Secretary of Agriculture, he was named the Governor of the Year in 2001 by who? The biotech industry. And he's a leading advocate, surprisingly enough, to GMO foods. That's how this happens. What other industry has people work for the companies in developing the products that now they're supposed to be watching over? That's why I'm doing this program. Because you need to know. I mean, I look at my kids. They're the first generation that do not know any other food besides this food. When I study this stuff, I go through documentaries, I'm reading so much research, and I have to filter it down into like a small amount. But if I were to read to you the studies and the conditions and the testimonials of parents whose kids, autisms, allergies, all the hyperactivities, and my gosh, it's like a list a mile long. These did not hardly exist years ago.
We never knew a child with autism or hyperactivity when I was young.
No,
We never saw it.
Not everybody, not every child is hyperactive.
no. Now, there's something called the Grocery Manufacturers Association. It's made up of over 300 companies. Monsanto, Syngenta, GM, or General Mills, PepsiCo, companies like this. So far to date, they have contributed over $100 million to defeat labeling laws in the United States. In 2014, Oregon and Colorado, those states individually wanted to enact labeling laws for their citizens. They were defeated. The GMA spent $40 million to defeat them. Monsanto alone, $10.65 million. The CEO, Pamela Bailey of the GMA, says they were pleased these initiatives were defeated. There's something called the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2014. Within a 90-page bill, they kind of slip, laws in there and things they want to pass because sometimes they just get overlooked. This was one paragraph in those 90 pages. The non-GMO advocates dubbed this DART, Denying Americans the Right to Know. This Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act that was put forth would preempt all states from passing GMO labeling laws, bar states from enacting laws that make it illegal for food companies to misrepresent their products by labeling GMO ingredients natural, limit the FDA's power to force food companies to disclose GMO ingredients.
Is this a federal law?
This is a federal law. It's going through Congress. Assembly Bill 2470 prohibits cities, counties, and districts from adopting or enforcing any ordinance on or before January 1st of 2015 that regulates plants, crops, seeds without consent of the FDA secretary, which basically that doesn't do anything. So farmers who buy GMO seeds have to sign a technology agreement. They can't even do their own studies. So if I have a field and I say I'm going to plant GMO crops here, I'm going to plant non-GMO crops here, I can't compare the two. It's illegal.
Well, they've always done that to compare different.
Right. It's illegal with this technology.
Huh.
They have to sign an agreement.
And they can't get corn except GMO corn now, can they? I mean,
Well, you can get it, but when you're talking about big farmers, that's what they're buying. Because there's also government money that's also given to farmers. They say that 50% of our diet should be fruits and vegetables. They only subsidize 10% of that industry. They give 80 to 90% of the money to grains, wheat, stuff like that, all the GMO products. So that's why it's very hard to get those seeds. So when we test these products, when scientists test them, unfortunately they find animals and test them on animals, right? Unfortunate for the animals, but it's like cancer. You test on rats and mice. Sometimes you test positive, they test positive for cancers, sometimes decades before we see that in the human population. So they're testing the animals. And what they're finding is in the dairy industry, very high incidence of abortions and inability to conceive, right? So in 1998, 2 years after Roundup-ready soybeans were introduced as a staple feed for animals, what they're finding is increased reproductive failure. When they tested the dairy cows in this one study, they found 70% abortion rate on top, so the babies were aborted, and on top of the already 10 to 15% infertility rate. Now, what are we finding now with us? They did these studies on rats, cattle, pigs, mice, hamsters. After the third generation of hamsters eating GMO food, they could not reproduce. Our kids are the first generation. Right? Some of the younger adults, first generation. And what are we seeing arising? What's going to happen when our kids have grandchildren? We're changing our molecular structure. We're changing our DNA. You know, this is important to know about. There's a study at Sherbrooke University Hospital in Quebec in 2011. They tested all the pregnant women and found 93% of them had traces of glyphosate in their blood. 80% of the umbilical blood tested was positive for glyphosate. Now, baby's born, and A lot of times they're fed formula. 42% of the soy in Similac soy is GMO soy. 48% of the soy in Gerber Gerber soy formula is GMO soy. 49% of Infamil Pro Soybean soy, and 60% of Parents' Choice soy. So the baby has traces of GMO in their blood before they're born, and then after we're feeding them that. 2 million kids receive formula through the government subsidized WIC program. All of it is GMO.
Right, all of them.
This new organism that they found in 1998 that was causing a lot of these reproductive problems, they had never seen it before. It did not exist in nature. They're trying to identify whether it's, or verify whether it's a virus, a bacteria, a fungus. They can't identify it, but they do know that it's self-reproductive. So it reproduces itself, self-replicating. Entity that is unknown to science before GMO was introduced, causes infertility and miscarriages in cattle, horses, pigs, sheep, and poultry, and also causes something called sudden death syndrome. There's over 130 published peer-reviewed articles on that. One scientist, Dr. Huber, who's an expert in science as it relates to toxicology of GMO foods, for 40 years he's taught plant pathology, soil microbiology, microecological interaction as it relates to plant disease. He's a pretty smart guy, okay? He wrote a letter to Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Vilsack, about this new organism. Quote, I have been a scientist in the professional and military agencies that evaluate and prepare for natural and man-made biological threats, including germ warfare and disease outbreaks. Based on this experience, I believe the threat we are facing from this pathogen is unique and of high-risk status. In layman's terms, it should be treated as an emergency.
When was that?
That was in 1998.
What about now?
He never heard a response. I saw an interview with him. He has not had a response. He was interviewed in 2014 and has not gotten a response back. And there are still no labeling laws, and there are still no requirements for these companies to disclose anything. The laws I mentioned that are being passed through, they're not going to be accountable to anyone. They don't have to tell you the ingredients. They don't have to tell you, they can label it as natural. So here we are saying, hey, January, I'm going to make some changes in my diet. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to buy this natural food. That could be the way they label it. And nobody can do anything about it. So what happens now? You need to be aware. You need to make choices for your family. That's why I'm doing this, so you're informed. You know, some people say, well, I don't think it's that bad. I said, well, that's fine. Inform yourself and make the decision that's right for you. I'm not going to place my opinions and what I do on anyone. My job is to inform you. Because if you're not informed, how can you make an intelligent decision? Your children don't have the choice, right? If you're informed, they're going to be informed. That's the way it works. I mean, my kids, they probably call me the food czar because I'm like, you know, I'm very particular about what my kids eat because I'm looking at these kids and I see them as this little ball of potential. I kind of picture them as like this body that's lit up with lights. That's how I envision everyone. And it's like a dimmer switch. You can do things that are going to turn the lights on and you're just going to glow. My thing is one day you're going to stand in front of whatever you believe, I believe God, and he's going to say, did you light up your life the way you had the potential to? Did you live to your fullest potential? So I have the ability to influence that in my kids. They can't make their own choices right now, at least while they're home. So I want them to grow healthy cells and tissues in every part of their body to the best of my ability to help them so they grow up to be as healthy as possible. I remember, my son Michael, he's in middle school, so he's heard this message. I've indoctrinated this into him more than the other kids because they're younger, right? But they all get the same message. I remember we were at a picnic when they were a camping trip, and there was a girl sitting next to Michael, and she was drinking a Coke or something like that, soft drink. And she says, oh, do you want some? He says, no. She said, why not? He goes, do you know that'll give you cancer and you're going to die? And this is probably about 3 years ago. Now, I almost said, Michael, don't, and I said, no, you know what? That's the truth. We might have to work on the delivery a little bit. But that's the truth. That's the truth, right? So he asked me questions, and so do the other two now. Daddy, does this give me energy? You know, when we're looking at food and stuff like that, will this give me energy? That's the way they view food. That's the way food's intended to be viewed, right? It's not supposed to be genetically modified. The wording alone, they could have come up with a different word. Hey, we're going to genetically engineer this food so it's safe for you to eat. Why is it not safe to eat now?
Yeah.
Right? So I want to go over a couple things with you. And then we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can inform yourself and be knowledgeable about the foods you're buying and the choices you make. Okay? So one of the main areas, some of the main areas that this affects, it's going to be your endocrine system, developmental, reproductive system, DNA, damage to DNA, cancer. It causes changes in your nervous system. You know, 80% of your immune system is found in your gut. Okay, the bacteria in your gut. What they're finding is the Bt toxin will, the way Bt works is the insect or whoever eats it, and it causes it to open up, okay, in the stomach, and it kills them from the inside. It's like an explosion that takes place. Well, what they found, there's only been one human consumption study of this, and it was with soybeans. And what they found was the bacteria accepted the Bt toxin as its own. It became embroiled basically into the genetic makeup of the bacteria, the flora in the stomach, and it reproduced itself. So now you have this environment in which that toxin is replicating itself within the body. So that causes something called gut permeability, intestinal permeability. And this is a big one with the food allergies. Glyphosate does the same thing. They are anti-nutrient, okay, so they block nutrients, and then they cause something called gut permeability. Now, what is that? When we eat food, we swallow, it goes down the tube, it goes all the way down, it's broken down along the way. And then what we do is we utilize parts of that food, it gets brought from the intestine into the blood sends it all over the place. You develop cells and tissues from that food in your heart, lungs, stomach, you become that food, right? That's how we grow and develop. So gut permeability means the food isn't broken down in its entirety, because we can't break it down because we don't know what it is and what to do with it. So now larger particles leave the intestine, travel through the blood. The body sees this as some invasive organism. It doesn't know what it is, so it starts to attack it. But now it's becoming part of the liver, part of the heart, part of the stomach. Now we attack ourselves. That's called an autoimmune response, autoimmune disease. We're having an autoimmune response to our own body. This is an allergic reaction. We see this with food. Now, if you eat anything that resembles that food, your body will have the same response. So say a child develops an allergy to peanuts, okay, and that happens with peanuts. Now, when something is cooked with peanuts and it has trace amounts in it, you're going to respond the same way. You know, it's like when we take a friend, we have to ask, is anything in this place cooked with peanut oil or have peanuts or mixed with peanuts? Because even though he's not eating peanuts, the body's going to respond the same way to that food. And you develop an autoimmune response to that food. These autoimmune disease didn't exist 20 years ago. They had to name a condition for the side effects that other things were causing. One of the big ones is the food. What's interesting is when they did that study on the cattle and the mice and the hamsters and all this stuff, what they found was that the toxin within the Bt not only replicated within those animals, not only did it cause gut permeability, and it started to produce allergic reactions to the food, it changed their gut, the bacteria in the gut. And when they started to study the behavior patterns of these animals, the behavior pattern changed. Now follow me on this. This is 20 years ago when we started to introduce this into our foods. They took hamsters, mice, rats, and they put them in little areas, cages, and they worked together as a unit, a community. But now they started to feed them GMO food, and they had to start isolating the animals because they became unruly, nervous, couldn't sit still. They were always moving. They started doing backflips and very crazy type movements and behavior. They started studying these animals, and they started to really watch their behavior patterns. And what they noticed then, when they would look inside the animal, their overall demeanor and the changes in the bacterial flora of these animals in the gut was extremely similar to kids who have autism. The gut bacteria changes in these children. They develop a highly inflammatory response within their gut. Their behavior patterns change. Don't get too close to me. Stay away. They can't move. They keep moving and things like this. That's the same erratic behavior that the animals showed. So this is 20 years ago. I don't remember ever hearing of autism growing up. In the 1990, 1 in 550 kids had autism. In 2014, 1 in 55 kids have autism. Now my kids' classes are about 30, I guess. That's almost 1 per class in every school. That to me is just mind-boggling. Now, dial it down a notch. Why do we have so many people anxiety, anxious, hyperactive, can't sit still, depression? See, when we eat this food, we all have this response. We all have these responses. But some of us are subclinical. It doesn't outwardly affect us. But some people are affected a lot more to where we see this behavior change. They said when they take autistic kids off of GMO foods, their behavior changes tremendously. It's not that they've been healed or corrected or whatever word you want to use, but they see tremendous changes in their gut bacteria and their overall demeanor. You know, we take care of some autistic kids here, and we adjust them, and we're able to make small little inroads. Now I'm starting to talk to the parents about making some changes with their diet. You know, we don't think of the diet as causing these conditions. The food is causing these conditions, but that's what we're seeing, the similarities. We're doing these studies on animals. How long is it going to take to catch up to where we find out the same problems are existing in humans? Right? So we have to educate ourselves. We have to be aware and knowledgeable about this stuff. You know, the glyphosate in mice, rats, changes in their reproductive organs, their uterus, their testes, changes in DNA in the offspring of these animals, right? The whole host of problems. You know, if you think of colitis and Crohn's disease and IBS and reflux and gastrointestinal infections, all these gut-related problems, well, that's where the food goes. That's where it's broken down. That's where this stuff is exposed. That's like the first line of defense. Now we have all these problems that are on the rise. If you look at charts, I have all these charts that I was looking at, and the rise since 1992 is unbelievable. In some of these cases, it's tremendous, 4 or 5 times what it was in the 90s. So if they don't have labeling laws, how do we become informed? How do you know what to look for? Well, one thing you look for is the butterfly. There's something called a Non-GMO project. This is the company, it's a nonprofit organization. I'm going to give you the websites that you'll see this on the packaging. Now, I just happened to take this out of our pantry. Somebody ate this last night. I don't know who it was. Is 365 is a Whole Foods brand. We just get these chips at Whole Foods. Now, you'll see up here it says organic, so I don't mind buying them, right? Down here, you're going to see USDA organic. That is what you want to look for when something is listed as organic. And you're going to see that little butterfly on the bottom. That's how I know this is a non-GMO product.
So it's
Now,
pretty
just like
much-
the air, the water, the rain, can it have some of it in there as things, spread? Yeah, it can. But this has been certified that the ingredients were not made with GMO products. You either have to look for the butterfly or organic. That's how you know you're not eating GMO food.
It
Because
just says organic spinach, I mean, it's gonna be organic.
it can say organic or it can say organic ingredients. If it says organic ingredients, 1 out of the 100 ingredients could be organic, but it's not organic. The ingredient was, but not the ingredients. So you have to be really diligent about looking at things.
So that's to say USDA organic.
But when you see USDA organic, that means the product itself is organic. Or the butterfly, it's made with non-GMO. You can have the butterfly without organic, but I'm showing you what to look for to be informed when you're looking at a package. Now, if you go down the aisle, now Whole Foods, I love shopping at Whole Foods. It doesn't cost me more than any other store. We're going to go over shopping lists and things like this next time. We've done surveys and I have spreadsheets that show us we compared food at Whole Foods and Martin's and Kroger, and we've gone down the list of the healthy, truly healthy or organic versions of what most people buy, and it's the same or less. Now, some products a little bit more, yes, some products are a little bit less, but in the end, pretty much evens out.
I have a hard
Okay.
time with milk.
Well, I'll go through dairy next time.
I
You don't
mean,
need milk,
Organic
but
milk, I mean, it's a lot.
yes. But I'll get into that next time because you don't really need milk. You don't get anything from it. We're the only animal goes to another animal and says, hey, let me drink your milk. Nobody else does it, another animal, because we don't get anything out of it. We stop producing the enzyme lactase that breaks down the lactose in milk that enables us to get to the vitamin D and the calcium. After you're about 3, 4 years old, when you're weaned off your mother's milk, we stop producing that enzyme because genetically we shouldn't be drinking milk, right? But now we go to a cow's milk, and that dairy cow, their digestive system is so much different than ours, right? So much more complex. So we now go to that cow and we drink their milk. We can't break it down. That's why we have all the lactose milk and the rice milk and the almond milk, because we can't break down the bond because we don't produce the lactase to break it down. So therefore, we're not getting the vitamin D and the calcium out of the milk. I hear people all the time, my doctor says, increase your calcium intake, your osteoporosis or osteopenia or your bone density. Well, should you be eating more calcium, or is it maybe you can't utilize the calcium you're getting? Remember, chelation, right? Yeah.
What do we want to drink? Almond milk? What's
Eat
good?
greens, going to give you a lot of calcium.
What about, I mean, it's in the house, cereal and all this.
What are you
stuff.
gonna
We use almond milk, we use
That's
rice
what I was
milk.
gonna say, I mean,
Well,
give me other,
we use
something
almond
else.
milk.
We don't like
Almond milk is
coconut.
great. I buy vanilla almond milk.
Almond
Rice milk is a great source. Rice milk is going to be a little more watery. Almond milk is going to be a little bit thicker,
Yeah, the
right?
almond's not
But those
bad.
are great choices. If you buy 100% organic soy, then soy milk can be something you can buy. Now, if you're going to buy milk and dairy, buy the organic because of the hormones and the, injected with the antibiotics and the vaccine. I mean, that's something I tell people, dairy and meats, that's where you spend your money on organic without a doubt. Because of the way the animals are treated and what they're given, because then we eat that.
Does Walmart have any?
Walmart
Organic?
does. Yeah, they have organic stuff. Sam's Club has it. Costco has it. Target has it. The reason why it's a little bit more in those stores, because they're going to buy the name brand and they're buying a very small amount. When I walk into a supermarket and I say, where's the health food section? They said, oh, that's the part in the corner over there. I'm like, that's it? So what is the other food, right? But they do, other stores have it, but it's typically going to be a little bit more there because they're buying a smaller amount of it. When you go into a Trader Joe's, a Whole Foods, Elwood Thompson's, a Good Foods Grocery, their whole store is basically going to be healthy. So they're buying greater quantities, so it's typically going to be less. Now, maybe not at a Good Foods because it's a smaller company, but the buying power of Whole Foods, especially their brand, is going to be less. So you just have to inform yourself. Now, I'm going to help you through that. That's why we're doing this in a series, because I just can't go over it all in one day. We're going to talk more about the dairy and stuff like that too. But those are good options right from now.
Talking about looking for that organic label, I
Correct.
have just made my list of seeds and plants
Right.
for the year because I've been growing a lot of our own vegetables and stuff,
Right.
and I'm trying to grow organic. If I
Yeah.
buy seed and plants that are labeled organic,
Then they're
are
organic.
they
Yes.
okay? They're
Yes.
safe.
And I know Whole Foods in the spring and in the fall they always have seeds. Yes.
So all
And
the
other
other
stores
seeds are
have
GMO?
organic stuff, organic seeds. I'm sorry.
So most all the other seeds are not good?
Correct. Correct. So this is what you want to look for. Now, if you go to, let me give you a couple of websites you can write down. And you know what else you can do as a consumer is, and the way things change, is to not buy the stuff that's GMO.
If it's not profitable, they don't.
Because, exactly, tomatoes in 1994, they tried to introduce tomatoes as GMO. But people didn't buy them because of the taste. It changed the taste of the tomato, so it was withdrawn. Potatoes, they tried it in 2001, or 1996 they started. In 2001 they pulled it because potato chip manufacturers and companies that use potatoes in their products weren't buying it, so they pulled it. Salmon, there's a company called, well, it doesn't matter, but the company's called Aqua Bounty. They're trying to introduce GMO salmon, but they put feelers out, nobody wants to buy it. Pigs, they tried to do this with bacon and stuff like this. A company was making pig products called Enviro Pig. I mean, why not just buy bacon? That's called bacon, right? And they started in 1995. In 2012, they euthanized the last pigs that this happened to because people weren't buying it. That's how you affect this. There's no.
People are informed now. I mean,
Well, I hope that they are.
years.
You know, the problem is, you know, we think that, and a lot of people will say, well, it produces more crops. In the beginning, the first 2 planting seasons, it may. But after that, it goes down because the soil is nutrient deficient. In cases of drought, non-GMO crops do much better, perform better than GMO crops because the root system is very deep. In India, I'm getting off here, but in India, they started planting BT cotton. The seeds cost a lot more. I don't know if you know India, but it's not a very wealthy country. Okay? The farmers had to take out more loans to buy the seeds. Now they're leasing the land and leasing the equipment. It's a lot of expense, so they need return on that. The seeds didn't take the first 2 years. Over the course of the first several years of farming BT cotton, there were 250,000 farmer suicides because they couldn't pay the notes back. Wow. And you know what? They still sell the BT cotton to the farmers in India. That's how crazy this is. So, I mean, every other country, if you look at Africa, Algeria, and Egypt have laws restricting GMO foods. Planting and distribution of GMO foods is illegal in Algeria. Sri Lanka, Thailand, China, Japan, Philippines have laws limiting GMO foods. Sri Lanka and Thailand have bans on importing GMO foods. Norway, Austria, Germany, United Kingdom, Spain, Italy, Greece, France, Luxembourg, Portugal have in place GMO restrictions. France has a non-GMO movement. The European countries are looking at a Euro-wide banning of GMO foods. In the Middle East, they have banned the planting of specific GMO foods and importing GMO wheats. So, you know, countries are doing things that will help the awareness, but we have to become aware. Now, I'm going to give you 4 websites that are really great websites, and if you don't have a way to write down, I'll have it available. Non-GMOproject.org. Okay, that's the regulating company. Okay, that tests the food. Non-GMOshoppingguide.com. That's a great app. I have that on my phone. Now, I'm not going to go through all the foods and things because there's hundreds of them. I will give you a list today of tremendous amount of ingredients to watch out for. But on these websites, you can get ingredients, you can get stores that are non-GMO stores, you can get tremendous amount of information.
Repeat the last one.
Non-GMOshoppingguide.com.
Thank you.
Responsibletechnology.org or .com. and then Mercola, MERCOLA.com. Great website for research.
So are these websites on your site?
We will have them on our site, and yes, we'll make them available to you, absolutely. Now, I also have a handout on your way out. You can grab this. These are just a list of a few ingredients. Now, I got this from, and I put it at the bottom so I don't get locked up, Non-GMOshoppingguide.com. This is where I got this. So you can take this, because what's very difficult is to understand, like soy. Okay, soy is GMO, right? But then you have soy lecithin. So there's a lot of derivatives. And what they do a lot of times is they change the naming a little bit. They have tons of names for the same thing to make it confusing. You know, aspartame, NutraSweet, amino sweet. These are all names for aspartame. They just call it flavoring. What does that mean? But that's aspartame. You know, we're going to talk about that in future talks, but that's how educated you have to be and knowledgeable you have to be. You have to be like a detective, because it's designed that way. So I hope it's probably been a little bit confusing and a little bit disturbing.
A little bit.
That's the intent, in part, was to be disturbing and confusing, because I want you to become aware. If you get a little irritated and you get a little upset, that's when action starts. So I appreciate your time. We are going to have this on our website. We're doing another program tonight. We have about 30 people here tonight, so I'm excited as to the turnout. We're going to do programs every month, the last Thursday of the month. We have a sign-up sheet. If you like what you hear and you want to learn more, we're going to, next talk and the subsequent talks are going to help you put together a healthy diet. This is just a foundation. This is meant to inform you about what GMO foods are, the effect it can possibly have, and A to Z on GMO foods. So I appreciate your time, and certainly I really respect the fact that you're here learning more. Tell other people, and if you like what you hear, have them come back with you. We open this up to anybody. That's part of our mission. If you have people that you'd like to get together at your house, we'll come and do a program for you, right? We charge a little bit, you have to feed me. But I'll do that. Non-GMO foods, I'm looking for the labels, right? But I'll do programs. People have asked me that. They're like, hey, you know what? I have a bunch of neighbors who'd like to get together, but timing and all. Put them together. I'll get together. My wife doesn't always like that because it's on the weekends. But no, but really, this is just part of what I feel very passionate about, what I do and what we have the ability to do, and how we have the ability to help you become more informed. So I appreciate your time, and I thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll tell you something, that was the scariest thing I have heard in my life.
Well,
That's for ISIS.